Good evening, and thanks for joining us for the 2023 Hartford Democratic mayoral debate hosted by WFSB Channel 3 and CT Insider. I'm Erin Connolly. The three Democratic candidates on the ballot in next week's primary are here tonight in Studio B. This is the first and only televised debate prior to Tuesday's primary. Let's introduce the candidates. A big welcome to State Senator John Fonfara, Judge Eric Coleman, and Arunan Arulampalam. They'll be taking questions from panelists Susan Raff, our chief political reporter here at WFSB, Dan Haar, columnist and senior editor at CT Insider, and Aya Galal, WFSB Hartford bureau chief. We do begin this debate tonight on a somber note, as one of Hartford's finest lost his life in the line of duty overnight. Officer Bobby Garton was killed when his cruiser was hit by a driver fleeing police. Right now, before we get to the candidates, we are going to pause for a moment of silence. Thank you for that. Now let's get to the debate, and here is the timing plan. Each candidate will get 90 seconds to deliver their opening statement. When it comes to the questions, the first candidate asked a question will get 90 seconds to respond. The opposing candidates will have 45 seconds each to reply. As the moderator, I have the ability to grant another 30 seconds to the original person questioned if it's determined a response is warranted. After that, we will move on to the next question. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to make a closing statement. It is important to note tonight, the campaigns agreed to this format and these rules when they committed to the debate. So with that, let's get started. Yesterday afternoon, we drew names to determine who would give the first opening statement. Judge Eric Coleman, that falls to you, and you have 90 seconds.
Good evening, everyone. And first, let me thank WFSB, Hearst Media, and CT Insider for sponsoring this debate and allowing me and my fellow candidates to present ourselves, our views, and our vision for the future of the city of Hartford. My name is Eric Coleman, and I want to be the next mayor of the city of Hartford. I want to be mayor because I care about the city, and I believe that I have personal experience, professional experience, and public service experience that make me uniquely qualified to lead the city of Hartford in resolving issues such as public safety, improving schools, and economic development, and so much more. The hallmark of a Coleman administration would be its openness, its inclusivity, its diversity, its transparency, its accountability, and its accessibility. I believe that I want to just thank again the sponsors of this debate for allowing us to have the opportunity to present ourselves. And I look forward to the questions, responding to the questions from the moderators and the panel, as well as the give and take between me and my fellow candidates.
Judge Coleman, thank you so much for that. Right now, we want to turn to Mr. Arulampalam. It is now your turn to make your opening statement.
Well, let me start by offering my condolences to the family of Officer Garton. It's a tragic loss for all of Hartford, and my family prays that your family can get whatever ounce of peace they can in the months and days ahead, and our hearts are with you. My name is Arunan. I am the Democratic Party's endorsed candidate for mayor of the city of Hartford. I'm CEO of the Hartford Land Bank, which is a nonprofit that was set up by the city of Hartford to take over vacant and blighted properties. But in my time there, we've created this program that's the first of its kind in the nation, where we take Hartford residents, we train them to redevelop those properties, to build wealth and build businesses off of them, and to build home ownership in the city with the lowest home ownership rate in the state of Connecticut. Before that, I served in Governor Lamont's administration and as Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Consumer Protection, got some real executive experience. But my most important role is as a husband and a dad. My wife and I are raising 5 young kids in the Frog Hollow neighborhood in Hartford. We've got the only single-family home on our street in a neighborhood with a 7% home ownership rate. We're sending our kids to public school in Hartford. as a husband and a dad, I get to see the challenges Hartford faces every day when I walk out my door. And yet, I see so much more clearly the possibility in Hartford, the potential in Hartford, what we can be if we can work together across Hartford. Is it one united Hartford? If we can work together to build a better and brighter future, I am so optimistic about the future of Hartford, and I'm excited to tell you why.
Mr. Aralumpalum, thank you so much for that. And now, Senator Fonfara, you have 90 seconds for your opening statement.
I, too, would like to extend my condolences to the Garton family. We all in Hartford mourn Bobby Garton's loss, and it's our city's loss. I'm a John Fonfara, born and raised in Hartford, raised in public housing, Rice Heights in the southwest end of the city. And I've served the city, went to Moylan, McDonough, Bulkley High School, public schools in Hartford. And I've served this city for a good part of my adult life. First in the House of Representatives, now in the Senate. I chair the Finance Committee, where I've worked to stabilize the state's finances, stabilize the city's finances, has brought home millions of dollars to the city. But I've always believed that Hartford is only as successful as its neighborhoods, and our neighborhoods are only as successful as our residents, which is why I'll be a different kind of mayor who will commit to three objectives. One, a education system that works, a comprehensive workforce development initiative with jobs, pipelines to jobs connected to Hartford employers, and also investments in neighborhoods so that no family has to leave Hartford to live in a better neighborhood.
Thank you, Senator Fonfara. And thank you for those opening statements. We appreciate it. Right now, we do want to go over the rules again for the questions. One of our panelists will address a question to a specific candidate. That candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. The remaining two candidates will each have up to 45 seconds to make remarks after that. If it is warranted, I may give the original responder another 30 seconds. Our first question tonight goes to Senator Fonfara and will be asked by Dan Haar. Dan.
Thank you very much, Aaron. On behalf of Hearst and everyone at CT Insider, we also send our condolences to the family of Officer Garton and to the whole city. And that tragedy last night, Senator, speaks to safety in the city of Hartford. It's a big issue for people both in and outside the city of Hartford, not just related to crime, but the whole traffic, pedestrian safety, all of it. What is your plan, if elected mayor, to make Hartford a safer place to be, both for people who live and work here and for people visiting and considering visiting from the outside?
Well, it's a comprehensive approach. There's in the near term, one, we have to pay our police officers competitive rates, so that because today we lose so many of our police officers to the suburbs after we train them. We also have to invest. Poverty is a key driver of so many of the symptoms facing Hartford, and crime is not the least of it. And until we as a city commit to addressing poverty, we will continue to try to manage those symptoms, including crime, including gun violence. If you look at a map of Hartford where the poorest neighborhoods are, the census tracts that are considered concentrated poverty, it's no surprise the greatest amount of gun violence is happening in those census tracts. Got legislation passed this session to address investing in those high poverty neighborhoods. By the way, there are 20 of them in Hartford, in the North End, in the South End, in Frog Hollow. These are neighborhoods that if you grow up in the neighborhood like that as a child, your chances of your income will be lower. Your chances of being incarcerated are higher. Your lifespan on average is shorter. And it is our obligation as a city to focus on our poverty. And so much of what we're experiencing in the city of crime is related to that.
Senator Fonfara, thank you very much. Judge Coleman, you now have 45 seconds to reply.
So I believe that the solution to addressing effectively crime in the city of Hartford will involve increasing the staffing of our police department and deploying some of that increase in non-traditional ways, such as mental health intervention, crisis intervention, de-escalation training. But the centerpiece would be community policing. I believe there needs to be a partnership between police officers and the communities that they protect and serve. That's so important in building trust. And part of the community policing that I propose would involve reinstallation of foot patrols.
Judge Coleman, I appreciate that. Mr. Arulampalam, you have 45 seconds as well.
As a resident in a neighborhood that has experienced crime, I understand the need to feel safe in the place you live. But I think both our police officers and our community members would agree that we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We got to deal with the people that we know are most likely to commit crime and layer on the kind of resources we need to protect our citizens. And so I'm going to create an Office of Violence Prevention to coordinate resources between our nonprofits, our police, and our schools. I'm going to have cops walking a beat again, building relationships in the community. And as mayor, I'll go out and walk a beat with them to make sure that we are bringing community members and police together. And then we're going to keep our schools open at night and all summer long and create really robust sports and rec program and music and arts and get to our kids early, build relationships and invest in them to give our kids a better option.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arulampalam. Appreciate that. Our next question will be from Aya Galal. Judge Coleman will be answering that question first. Aya.
Thanks, Aaron. Judge Coleman, over the summer, we saw the number of homicides in Hartford go up. What can be done to help remedy what has been a problem for years?
Yeah, I believe, as Senator Fonfara has laid out, that there needs to be a long-term and a short-term approach. On the short term, the police department, in partnership with residents of the community, have to do a better job of monitoring the flow of guns and drugs into the community. And I believe that guns and drugs are the root of many of the problems, particularly gun violence, that's occurring in the city of Hartford. So if the Hartford Police Department needs assistance, I think we should call upon the state police to lend that assistance. We might call on federal agencies like Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, as well as the Drug Enforcement Administration. But we also need to positively develop our young people and make certain that they are under the influence of responsible adults as often as possible. And for that, we need to utilize our network of facilities like churches, recreation centers, community centers, and school buildings in order to provide enrichment programs so that we can impart certain values like respect for authority, respect for human life, respect for elders, build character, develop leadership skills, work ethic skills. And we also need to address despair and loss of hope by creating more job opportunities and training for residents of the city of Hartford.
Judge Coleman, thank you so very much. Mr. Arulampalam, you have 45 seconds to reply now.
Well, we've got to stem the flow of illegal drugs into our illegal guns into our community. As I said before, we've got to have cops walking a beat again. We've got to coordinate our efforts around violence prevention to get to these young folks who are showing risk factors of committing violence before it happens. But look, we have so many young people in this city who are really hurting. They've been through real trauma in the last few years. Many of them have been victims of these crimes. And we need to make sure that we're layering on the kind of resources to reach them before they walk down that path. I'm going to create a youth advisory council because I think too often we fail to listen to our young people. It's a bunch of older folks in a room making decisions for them. I want to get young people engaged in this administration. I want them to get engaged in rebuilding a village in which all of us come around them and layer the resources they need to succeed.
Mr. Arulampalam, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. Judge Coleman, you have 45 seconds to, Senator Fonfara, I should say, you have 45 seconds to reply.
So firstly, in the near term, there's a program in Boston known as Operation Nightlight that has 2 police officers, a parole officer or probation officer that goes randomly nightly through the week, meeting with those that have been involved with gun violence, It's not to arrest, it's not to harass, but to have just checking in with them. That regular connection does make a difference, and it has seen a substantial reduction in gun violence in that city. This past session, I got funding for, I'm going to run out of time, but funding for focusing on at-risk 8 to 12-year-olds before they become justice involved. And lastly, reintroducing fathers into so many young men's lives, and that is something that the city can be a big supporter of.
Senator Fonfara, thank you so much for that. Our next question is going to be about housing concerns, and Susan Raff is addressing that to Mr. Arulampalam. Susan.
Thank you. Mr. Arulampalam, we know that Hartford faces serious challenges with housing, affordable housing, but also livable conditions for the people of Hartford. What is your plan to provide more housing for its residents, and also housing to draw professionals to come to the city?
Yeah, let's start with talking about affordable housing, because I think too often politicians go with the easy answer of we've got to create more affordable housing units. And when my wife and I bought our first home in Hartford, we lived right next to this apartment complex that had Section 8 residents in it. And in our time there, it went from being owned by a Hartford resident to being owned by a slumlord from New York. And those slumlords, immediately, there's really disrepair in that building. We could see the grass growing, the bricks falling apart. And people had lived in that building for 30 years, 40 years. There was a community there. People had barbecues and birthday parties that we went to. And in the winter of COVID in 2020, they kicked those residents out because to those slumlords, those residents were just numbers on a spreadsheet. And as we increase affordable housing units through using existing programs, oftentimes we're just benefiting those types of slumlords who are using those units to leech wealth off of some of our hardest working residents. And as mayor, you can have a really unique role in changing the economic model of our housing, going after those people who aren't taking care of their property, going after those out-of-state slumlords, taking over those properties using tools that we already have, using our blight liens and our tax liens, and putting them in the hands of Hartford residents, the kind of residents that we're training in our developers cohort at the Hartford Land Bank to be able to take on properties to build wealth, and the kind of wealth that will stay in our community and generate in our community and build wealth for generations to come.
Mr. Arulampalam, thank you so much. Senator Fonfara, you have 45 seconds to reply.
I think that the amount of housing stock that we have in our city could create much more supply than we currently have. There are units that are in bad shape. We need to have rapid response to address properties that are blighted and uninhabitable. Secondly, you have renters or owners in Hartford who won't rent because they've had bad experiences. And if we can build confidence in those owners with respect to the tenants that they would be renting to, then I think we can open up the market there. There are people who rent today paying more in rent than I am in my mortgage. We can help more people get into home ownership. We are the lowest home ownership rate in the state by far.
Senator, thank you so much. Judge Coleman, it is now your turn. You have 45 seconds.
Yes, I do believe we have to create more units of affordable housing, whether that's through new housing or renovated housing. And I believe we have to strengthen our blight ordinance so that it has more teeth and that code violations can be enforced, including utilizing the process of eminent domain to take property that has been neglected by absentee, out-of-state slumlords. And that property needs to be refurbished so that tenants who are looking for reasonably priced units can do so. I'm not sure how we build wealth with the approach that the Hartford Land Bank is taking. Out of 39 properties listed, only 6 of those are in the title of individuals. And of those 6, 3 of them do not live in Hartford.
Mr. Arulampalam, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
Yeah, I'm really proud to stand on what we've done at the Land Bank. In fact, it's becoming a model in many other places. Your numbers are a little inaccurate, but we've gotten about 21 structures, and almost all of them are in the process of being handed over to Hartford residents. Now, there were 2 that before I came to the Land Bank, were given to folks who are outside of the state of Connecticut. And that is the core of why I built the Developers Cohort Program, to build the kind of capacity in our community for Hartford residents to take over these vacant and blighted properties. And since I've been there, 90% of our properties have gone to residents in the city of Hartford, 100% of them to developers of color.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We want to move on to question number 4. That will be going to Judge Coleman. And Dan, this is about what Hartford has to offer.
Yes, and specifically downtown. We have the Yard Goats, best AA stadium in the world, and we have a makeover coming at the XL Center. We have amenities that bring people in, but the downtown as a whole is struggling, as you all know. And Judge Coleman, what's your plan for both people who live in the city, in the neighborhoods, and people who live outside the city to increase vibrancy for the center of the city, which is something of a beacon, we hope, for the rest of the state, as well as for the residents?
Well, let me first jump back to the housing issue. The numbers that I used in my response to the housing question comes from the Hartford Land Bank website. And on that website, there are listing, and viewers and members of the public can go to that website themselves and verify. There are 39 properties listed. Only 6 of those properties ended up in the ownership of Hartford residents. And of those 6...
The rest of them are all on the way towards that ownership.
Please don't interrupt
once more
me.
lying to the public about this.
It's not a lie. It's the website information of the Hartford Land Bank. Viewers can go and verify for themselves about that. As far as downtown development is concerned, I think it needs to occur. It needs to continue, but there needs to be a better balance between development downtown and development in the neighborhoods. There's no question neighborhoods have been neglected, and the infrastructure upgrades are necessary. We see flooding of businesses and homes in the northeast section of Hartford in particular. We need, obviously, to develop more housing, renovate housing. What the Hartford Land Bank is doing is not sufficient.
Judge Coleman, we appreciate your time. Mr. Arulampalam, I assume you would like your 45 seconds to reply.
Sure. Look, if you go and look at that document, which I hope you do, you'll see that there is a status tab, a status column, and it'll show you where each of the properties are going. Now, some of these properties are going to smaller scale developers who are still trying to work out their financing. Some of them are in the process of being transferred to smaller scale developers. But our statistics speak for themselves. We are building housing. We are putting housing on the market at a really extraordinary pace. And I'm really proud of my record in the land bank. Will I get time to respond to the downtown question? I'd love to talk about that too.
You have 10 seconds right now.
Okay. Well, look, I think it's really important that we grow every part of the city. And we can't continue the kind of divisions that have dragged us backwards as a city. It's important that we build a downtown that we're all proud of, that creates a tax base for the rest of our city, but that we continue that development into neighborhoods. And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Thank you, sir.
Rebuilding commercial corridors in our neighborhoods and rebuilding housing.
Up. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Senator Fonfara, your 45 seconds is now.
I have supported the Science Center, not only to construct it, but to support it, keeping it going and growing. I have supported the new soccer stadium, $10 million to close the gap in that. That's drawing a lot of people into our city. I've supported the XL renovation that Dan just spoke about. But we have the Connecticut River that East Hartford now is taking steps to develop. Glastonbury is, Rocky Hill is, Middletown is. We are not. And we need to take advantage of that great historic asset that we have. And I've supported housing in downtown Hartford. It is now a neighborhood. It is a neighborhood now where are people living 24/7. But there are other, Albany Avenue, Park Street, Franklin Avenue, Farmington Avenue, that we must and will develop along with our downtown.
Senator Fonfara, thank you very much. Right now, our next question is from Aya Galal, and it is about something that tends to be a cornerstone of the community. Aya, you're addressing this to Mr. Arulampalam.
Thanks, Erin. Mr. Arulampalam, For several years, there have been talks about bringing a grocery store to Hartford that would serve downtown and North End neighborhoods. What will you do to bring a grocery store to this part of the capital city?
Well, I'll aggressively pursue a grocery store in our city. But one of the challenges we've had is that some of the big box stores just don't see the value of a grocery store in Hartford. And I think they're dead wrong on it. And I think that there's some bias that comes into that calculation because poor people, when it comes to groceries, have no less purchasing power in many communities than people who have more wealth, because everyone has to eat. Everybody needs groceries for their kids and for their families. And so I will aggressively pursue a grocery store. But here's another thing we're doing at the land bank. I mentioned that not all of our properties are structures. Some of them are vacant lots. And we've been working with a group in the North End out of the Keeney Park Sustainability Project to develop a group of urban farmers who come from the city of Hartford. They've had a cohort that they've been training. And these are people who want to own land and start businesses by growing whole fruits and vegetables and foods within communities that are food deserts and food swamps. And, I've walked these neighborhoods with these farmers, and they've knocked on doors, and we wanted to get real community buy-in before we could put them there. And they've talked about the importance of healthy eating and teaching kids in communities what those healthy foods are. And I think it's a really good plan to take some of our vacant lots, to turn them into urban farms, and then to create some small grocery stores, maybe. There's one right now in Frog Hollow that's a sliding scale grocery store. We're working on trying to create one on Capon Street in the North End, but creating some smaller options for healthy food in communities to try to give people that option of whole healthy foods within food deserts.
Thank you very, very much. Senator Fonfara, 45 seconds to reply.
I strongly support a grocery store in the food deserts of our city. But I feel that is a function of our poverty and the fact that we have not invested in our neighborhoods to create the environment where businesses want to locate, including larger grocery stores. I passed legislation, I worked on and got legislation first of its kind in the state to invest in high poverty, low opportunity census tracts in our city. $300 million over the next 6 years in those census tracts to invest in workforce development and infrastructure in these neighborhoods to grow and grow jobs, increase incomes, and you will see in the investment in those neighborhoods a change in terms, including the siting of a grocery store.
Senator Fonfara, we appreciate your time. Judge Coleman, you now have 45 seconds.
So some would say that a measurement of a healthy neighborhood is a neighborhood that has a supermarket, a pharmacy, and a bank. There are many neighborhoods in Hartford that have none of those things. As far as a grocery store is concerned, I would strongly support the development of a grocery store. And if there are no developers who are willing to step forward and develop a grocery store or supermarket for a particular neighborhood in Hartford, then I think the city should step forward and develop a grocery store, employ residents from the neighborhood, and help that neighborhood to become sustainable and healthy, and allow people who are in need of a place to buy groceries to do so.
Judge Coleman, we appreciate your time. We want all of you to sit tight right now because we do need to take a quick commercial break. The 2023 Hartford Democratic mayoral debate right here on Channel 3 will continue after this.
The Hartford Democratic Mayoral Debate, co-hosted by WFSB 3 and CT Insider.
Welcome back, everyone, to our primetime debate between the three Democratic candidates for Hartford mayor who are on the ballot for next Tuesday's primary. Here in Studio B, we have State Senator John Fonfara, Judge Eric Coleman, and Arunan Arulampalam. Our panelists include Channel 3's Susan Raff, CT Insider's Dan Haar, and Channel 3's Aya Galal. We have several more issues to tackle tonight. Recapping the rules here, a panelist will ask a question of a candidate. That candidate has up to 90 seconds to respond. Then we move on to the other two candidates who each have 45 seconds. We may give the original responding candidate another 30 seconds if it is deemed warranted. Susan Raff has the next question, and she will be asking it of Senator Fonfara. Susan.
Senator Fonfara, Luke Bronin, the current mayor of Hartford, said this week that we all have a vested interest in the capital city. What role do you think the suburbs and neighboring communities play in supporting the city?
It's a huge role. Obviously, we are neighbors, and many residents of suburban towns around Hartford grew up in Hartford. They love the city, but many do not come back to our city. Some may work here, many have fond memories, but that's the extent of it. And we need to do so much more to attract folks back into our city, not necessarily live here, spend their money here, have fun here, be part of, but not just to visit to see a basketball game, but then go back home, that we create an environment where they want to stay and be part of, and not just downtown, but the ethnic mix of our city, which is phenomenal, whether it's West Indian, African American in the North End on Albany Avenue, whether it's a Puerto Rican, Latino on Park Street, a host of other, we have Bosnian communities in Hartford now, a whole host of different communities that make Hartford so important. But what we are missing is a belief that we together, Hartford and our suburban neighbors, the power of that which is taken for granted throughout the country, but because we don't have county government here, we don't realize the loss that we are experiencing because of the lack of connection and the attracting wealth, attracting talent, attracting businesses to the region as we work together, as opposed to 13, 14 individual principalities.
Senator Fonfara, thank you so much for that response. Judge Coleman, you now have 45 seconds to reply.
I just believe that Hartford should be the hub of the region. And I don't know if we'll ever have the business sector or the retail sector that we once had in Hartford, but certainly Hartford should be the hub of the region. And that does not say that there should not be collaboration between Hartford and the surrounding suburbs. I would support that insofar as it concerns perhaps sharing services, but under no circumstances would I or most other people offer political influence to a surrounding suburb in exchange for a campaign contribution.
Judge Coleman, thank you so much. Mr. Arulampalam, you have 45 seconds.
Sure. I'm really proud that in addition to being the endorsed Democratic candidate for mayor, I have been endorsed by Luke Bronin, because I think that Luke did a really good job of going to our surrounding neighbors, going to our surrounding towns, and telling them why it was important to invest in Hartford, why the future of Hartford was so tied to their future. And that's something that I would continue as mayor. I think it's really important to get those in our neighboring regions to buy into what's going on in Hartford, to feel invested in the future of what's going on in Hartford. And I'm proud to show off the city of Hartford, to show what we have, to show what we can offer to the region. I hope that everybody feels like this is their capital city, that this is their city, that they have an interest in what happens in the future of Hartford.
Thank you very much for that. The next question will also be addressed to you. It was regarding the financial situation in the city. And CT Insider's Dan Haar, you have that question.
Thank you, Aaron. Mr. Arulampalam, this is a continuation of just what we've been talking about. 6 years ago exactly, the city came within days of becoming the first American state capital to file for bankruptcy. It didn't happen. It was bailed out by the state. it has worked to some extent, and to another way of looking at it, the city's finances are in really no better shape fundamentally. What is your plan for stabilizing the city financially other than seeking more state money?
Look, I think we have weathered a storm, and we have continued to stay on a strong financial footing because of real sacrifices that have been shared across all of our city, but also real solid financial leadership at the very top. I think it's part of why Luke has endorsed me as mayor, because it's really important to keep a steady hand at the wheel. It's really important that while we are excited about what's possible in the city, and while we want to invest in the future of the city, that we do so prudently in a way that allows us to build a future for our kids. Look, I'm raising 5 kids in this city. I want to see them watch a strong and thriving Hartford come to be. I want to see them proud of their capital city. And I think all the time about the kind of city we're leaving to our children, the kind of city that we're leaving 2-3 generations in the future. And it's so important that we continue to maintain the fiscal stability of the city, because all of these things that we're talking about tonight, all of the things that we want to do, all the things that we know are possible in the city are not possible if we lose sight of the importance of our fiscal grounding.
Mr. Avralampolam, thank you so much. Senator Fonfara, you have 45 seconds.
Dan, I would say that the state has a huge responsibility far beyond what it has done with respect to taking on the obligation of our pensions at the city of Hartford. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, was the author of the legislation that has stabilized our state's finances. We today have a $3.5 billion budget reserve fund. We've retired $7 billion in debt. I was part of the effort to keep Hartford out of bankruptcy. But it is also the state that has encouraged the exodus of wealth, exodus of folks out of the city of Hartford and other cities in Connecticut, and therefore the state has a responsibility to help us move ahead in terms of our finances. But I'll say it again, and I'll say it all night long, it is our poverty that is contributing to so many of the symptoms. If I ask you to name 3, 5, and you're naming them here tonight in your questions.
Thank you, Senator Fonfara.
That is the underlying cause is our poverty.
We appreciate it. Judge Coleman, you now have 45 seconds as well.
Thank you. The big issue, I think, is the tax base of the city of Hartford, which has been eroding. It needs to be expanded, and it can be expanded by grooming or encouraging more taxpayers to reside in the city of Hartford. I would support a policy that would rely upon upgrading the existing residents of the city of Hartford to grow their income, to put them in more sustainable jobs, rather than importing individuals to come reside in the city of Hartford. I believe that we ought to provide incentives to teachers, firemen, and police officers to remain in the city, and the state should fully fund pilot and ECS.
Judge Coleman, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. We do want to move on to our next question. This is from Aya Galal about the challenges with poverty, and this is for Senator Fonfara.
Thanks, Aaron. Senator Fonfara, we know that Hartford has struggled with poverty for generations. Is there something new you would try to improve poverty that's a factor in poor performance in schools and the source for crime and other issues in the city?
Thank you. I don't know if there is not a more important issue facing our city, and why I've said in my campaign I'll be a different kind of mayor. Because I think mayors far back from Luke Bronin, but including Luke Bronin and city government in general, have focused on managing the symptoms of our poverty: crime, blight, bad roads, high taxes. We do our best to manage those. Until we address the underlying cause of all those things, we are poorer today than we were 10 years ago. We'll be poorer in 10 years from now. If you want to know where our city's going, ask where are our 5-year-olds. If you think our 5-year-olds on average are in good shape, then we'll be in good shape. They're not. We're not investing in our children and their education. Too many are starting kindergarten unready. Too many are not reading by 3rd grade. Too many are graduating without the skills necessary for career or college. we have accepted these statistics for decades. It's criminal. We can do much better, and the mayor should lead that effort, not have the school system be the sole entity responsible for education. We don't have an office of workforce development in our city. We will under a Fonfara administration. There is unemployment rates are probably in the 30% in some of our neighborhoods in this city. And lastly, investing in our neighborhoods so that people don't leave as they begin to do better financially.
We appreciate it, Senator Fonfara. Thank you very much. Judge Coleman, it is now your turn, and you have 45 seconds.
Yes, it was, I believe, some years ago, Gerald Tarazzi, who was the superintendent, the state superintendent of education, and he first cited the concentration of poverty as something that caused many problems, but particularly in his comments, he was talking about the inequity in our schools. I also, as mayor, would establish an Office of Workforce Development, and with that office, I would seek to provide remedial education if it's necessary. I'd also try to establish work ethics and do any kind of substance abuse training and counseling, treatment and counseling, all in an effort to make the residents of the city job ready.
Judge Coleman, we very much appreciate it. Mr. Aralampalam, you have 45 seconds.
You know, my kids go to the same public school in our neighborhood that most of the elementary age kids on our block go to. And as we leave out the door in the mornings, when you've got 5 young kids, you can imagine it takes a while to get out the door. We're always running late, and we could walk it. It's a little bit of a walk. We usually end up driving, but we drive past a bunch of kids who are walking because they don't have access to transportation, and that's a small barrier. But it makes me think about how many barriers there are with kids who live on our street, who go to the same school as our kids, but have completely different sets of opportunities in their life. We've got to create opportunities for jobs for every kid coming out, opportunities for careers for every kid coming out of our schools, and then opportunities to build wealth in the neighborhood that they live in. If we want to build a middle class again in Hartford, we've got to be aggressive about creating opportunities and pipelines to get there.
Mr. Aralampalam, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Right now, we do want to go to Susan Raff. She has our next question, and it is for Judge Coleman.
Judge Coleman, I think all three of you have talked about housing and poverty. I want to talk about blight. And when you drive through the city of Hartford, you really get a sense of the conditions that people are living in. And absentee landlords. Not only are these buildings unsafe for the people who live there, but they attract squatters and drugs, and they're often set on fire. And that creates even more problems for the city of Hartford. So with that, how do you hold landlords accountable? How do you make them be more responsible to the people of the city?
So very simply, I would be very aggressive as mayor, and I would have the city be very aggressive in housing code enforcement. If a property is delinquent in the payment of taxes, if the property is a nuisance, if the property is a venue for illegal activities, if the property is poorly maintained, if the property is rodent infested, I would have the city move aggressively to cite that property owner, and if the property owner does not respond appropriately, I would do like the city of New Britain has done recently and move to take the property through the process of eminent domain. Once the city takes the property, the city has authority to upgrade the property, renovate the property, make it much more habitable for the tenants in that property. They can now face reasonably priced rents, and the situation would be better for all involved. I don't know what attracts out-of-state slumlords to come to Hartford and buy up property and then neglect that property. But under a Coleman administration, we would take very aggressive steps to discourage that kind of activity.
Judge Coleman, we very much appreciate your response. Mr. Aralampalam, your 45 seconds begins now.
Well, the thing that attracts out-of-state slumlords is the millions of dollars they make off those properties. And I'll tell you what I've already done. When I was Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Protection in the Lamont administration, we worked with the Attorney General's office to initiate the first lawsuit of its kind in the nation to go after a notorious slumlord in the north end of Hartford, Emmanuel Koo, and to take his profits, to take money right off his table. And my hope as mayor is to go after the biggest slumlords in this city, make an example of them, to take their profits. We actually already have the tools. We don't need to use eminent domain. We have the tools using our blight enforcement, using foreclosures on properties with liens on them, to take over those properties, to go after the biggest slumlords, and to bring that money back to Hartford residents, to reinvest in those properties and give safe and decent housing to every single family in our city.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Senator Fonfara, you have 45 seconds.
Blight is one of the most visible things that we see in our city. Makes us feel bad about our city. But it is a condition of our poverty. And we have neighborhoods in Hartford, census tracts in Hartford, where the household income is $22,000, 21, not individual income, which is very low. Household income is $21,000. That's the average. That means there are households that are below that. And we are okay with it. We've been okay with it for years. And as mayor, neighborhoods will be my priority. They are not right now at City Hall and have not been in my time in the city, which is a lifetime. We have to change our priorities and our focus, and we can address blight and all the underlying drivers of blight and all the other issues in our neighborhoods.
Senator Fonfara, thank you so much. One last question for each of you. This is going to be a quick one. It is a yes or no answer. If you do not win the primary, will you support the Democratic nominee for mayor? Judge Coleman, your response.
So I cannot answer yes or no. I'm sorry, but it's to be determined.
Mr. Arulampalam.
I'm a Democrat through and through, so I'll absolutely support the nominee for mayor.
And lastly, Senator Fonfara.
I've not chosen to move on to November. I believe the winner of this primary will be the next mayor of the city, and the answer is yes.
I appreciate your responses. It is time now for closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. We drew names yesterday to determine the order. Senator Fonfara, you will start, followed by Judge Coleman, and then Mr. Arulampalam. Mr. Fonfara, you now have 2 minutes.
I want to thank Channel 3, WFSB, Connecticut Insider for hosting this today. The opportunity to speak to probably more of my constituents as a state senator and the city as a whole than any other opportunity. Grateful for that. I started off by saying I was born in this city, lived all my life in this city. I have fought for it the vast majority of my adult life. And I have decided to run for mayor because I believe strongly that as much as I've gotten done as state senator for the city of Hartford, what I believe the city needs most, I can't accomplish from where I am, but I believe I can as mayor of this city. The potential of that job, which I don't think is fully exercised, to address our poverty, which is the root cause of so many of the issues our city is facing, but we have no plan to how to change that. Our schools are underperforming. We're having too many kids start school without preschool experience. And when you start school without preschool experience, you're likely not ready. You're not reading by 3rd grade. We don't work hard. We don't create initiatives to skill up our workforce, to raise incomes in our city, and we don't invest in our neighborhoods, which will make Hartford such a more attractive place for the residents who are here. We export success stories in our city every day. They don't write a letter to the mayor. They don't put up a billboard. But when they put there's a few more bucks in their pocket, sadly more believe that a better life for their children, for themselves, for their investment in their property is in another town. And we have an obligation. We have an obligation to our residents to have their children have the same opportunities that most in this state enjoy and take for granted, and the same opportunities in terms of owning a home if they so choose in the city of Hartford. We can do a lot more. A mayor can do a lot more, which is why I've said I'll be a different kind of mayor.
Senator Fonfara, thank you very much. Judge Coleman, now to your closing statement. Again, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I want to begin by offering my condolences to the family of Bobby Gardner. May he rest in peace. I'm also surprised to learn that as the president of the Hartford Land Bank, Mr. Aralampolam does not know that the process of eminent domain is not available, is not at the disposal of the city of Hartford. The blight ordinance permits fines and it permits receiverships. It doesn't permit eminent domain, and we would need to modify our blight ordinance in order to accomplish what he's suggesting we should accomplish. I am a public servant, have been so for most of my life, and as a public servant, like any other public servant, if I see a problem or problems, I want to solve them. If I see challenges, I want to meet those challenges. I've been connected to Hartford for over 50 years. I was married in Hartford. I operated a small business in Hartford. I worship in Hartford. I pay taxes in Hartford. And I was blessed to have the opportunity to serve Hartford as a state representative and as a state senator. Most recently, I retired as a Superior Court judge, but I believe that all of the skills that I've acquired in those positions of public service are immediately transferable to the duties and responsibilities of the mayor of the city of Hartford. As I talk to constituents during this campaign, they tell me they want a city that's safe, they want schools that are effective, they want economic development that includes taxes not being overly burdensome. They want effective services delivered in a timely way. They want the quality of life of Hartford to be appealing. Those are the things that I seek to address as the mayor of Hartford.
Judge Coleman, we appreciate your closing statement. Mr. Aralampolam, you now have 2 minutes.
Look, you've heard a lot tonight about the challenges of Hartford, about what is wrong with Hartford. But I want to take a moment tonight before you leave to talk about what's right in Hartford. Hartford's got these incredible neighborhoods. They're like hidden gems all over our city. They have so much culture and history and vibrancy, and they're just waiting for the right investment. Hartford's got a downtown that is shaking off the dust of COVID and rising again, rebuilding itself better than ever. Hartford's got residents who are ready to roll up their sleeves and build a new future in this city. When the Land Bank created our developer training program, we put out an application without any marketing, and we got almost 300 applicants, all Hartford residents, 94% of them residents of color. All of them wanted to be a part of rebuilding their own neighborhoods, reimagining their own neighborhoods, brick by brick, house by house, block by block. I think about 2 friends of mine who wanted to start a coffee shop. And so they started a Kickstarter campaign that took a number of years. But now they have this great place right across from Dunkin' Donuts Park. They named it Samia, which means seed. And to me, Hartford is thousands of seeds of hope. There is so much hope all around Hartford. And if you can't see it, then you're not looking closely enough. Hartford is an incredible city. We are a city that is on the rise. Our best days are ahead of us. And I know that if we can work together, if we can stretch together across North End and South End and West End and downtown, we can build a better and stronger Hartford, a city on a hill. And I want you all to be a part of that. Thank you for your time tonight, and have a great night.
Mr. Aralampolam, thank you very much. Judge Coleman and Senator Fonfara, thank you to the 3 of you. We really appreciate all of you being here tonight. It is so important. We also appreciate you watching. That concludes the 2023 Hartford Democratic mayoral debate. We want to thank our partners at CT Insider and our distinguished panelists. The Hartford mayoral primary is next Tuesday, September 12th. Remember, your vote matters, so get out and make your voice heard. For everyone here at WFSB Channel 3 and CT Insider, I'm Erin Connolly. Good night.